Well, you can live the life you want to create for yourself, but I think you've got to make some choices along the way. And I think as an entrepreneur, you have only two choices that you can make your world about as an entrepreneur. Choice number one is money. You can go be an entrepreneur who pursues becoming one of the wealthiest, richest, money-healthy people on the planet. Choice number two is you can build your entrepreneurship journey around people. Whichever one you pick ends up determining the choices you make. It's like, John, you don't have to be the best social media person of all time, but you have to know what works and then help people implement what works, connect them to others who can help teach them what works, and then you become invaluable to that community.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself one teeny tiny little favor. Make sure to give us a follow because we're bringing on amazing guests, and I wouldn't want you to miss any of the amazing guests we have lined up. So without further ado, let's get right into this one. James, for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to get to know you yet, to get to meet you in person yet, man, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, my name's James, and I moderate a Facebook group for a living. My mom is very proud of me, no doubt about that. But yeah, I've been with Keller Williams 18 years. I started after I got fired from a job as a TV news producer, right after I got out of college. And so I got in real estate. Somebody suggested I look at it as an opportunity. And so I did. I got into real estate, and I've been with Keller Williams now 18 years. But and all sorts of different roles. I sold, I led offices, I helped run a team. I've been in coaching with Keller Williams, and now my job every day is get up and talk to agents like you, John, about what's working, what's not working, and how to have great businesses. I do that inside of a Facebook group I have called Pivot Shift Ahead. We've got 112,000 members of that group now, which is really cool. So I'm excited about what's happened with that. And then I lead a private mastermind community that you're a part of called Inspire that's got, 700 and some odd agents that meet on a weekly basis just to mastermind around stuff that's helping them succeed.
Yeah, that's amazing. So James, I'm excited for this because as I said, I've known you for a little while because of these Zoom calls and the events we've been hosting. But one thing I haven't really got to know yet is your backstory a little bit. So I know you a little personally from all the Zoom calls. I feel like we've been friends for years now because of all these calls. But it's like, take us back in a time machine. What was little James like? What was it like growing up in your household?
You'd have to ask my mom. You'd have to tell you. I bet it was entertaining. I've always been. She told me a story one time that we were at a mall, and she had to go to the restroom or whatever. So she leaves with my grandma, and when she comes out, there's this group of people standing around the mall directories. Do you remember this when the mall had like a posted directory that you'd go see where all the stores were, and all these people were standing around looking at the mall directory, and I'm like 3 or 4 years old. And I'm standing in front of it doing the weather, like I was on TV, like it's raining at Macy's, whatever. So I've just kind of been me, right? I've been comfortable being in front of people for a long time. And, growing up, that's the kind of stuff I did. I was in show choir growing up and ran cross country in high school. But I thought I'd always wanted to do the news for a living. I wanted to be a news reporter, a news anchor. I went to college for that. And that's when I discovered the whole part of producing the news, right? Putting it all together. And I really liked that because that meant I was in charge. So I really liked doing that. And that's what I did. I thought I was going to be a news producer for the rest of my life. But when I got my first job, I got very excited from time to time about what we should cover and maybe what we shouldn't cover. And sometimes I didn't know where the line was on when a decision had been made and it was time to let it go. And eventually they were like, you can't work here anymore. Because I was a total jerk. I mean, I was really just wound up about stuff all the time. And I thought my way was right all the time. And they finally said, look, you're a talented kid and we like you, but we don't want you here. So you have to go. So I got out, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me because I got into real estate. And then now I get to use, what's fun is like the stuff I was going to school for and always wanted to do, I'm doing now, but in the real estate world, right? I host a show in air quotes every day and producing content together just like you are. And putting on events and things like that. So it's like the thing I wanted to do, but in a much more fun environment, and I make more money than I would as a news producer too. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, and I love your story because it's something, and it's just so coincidental how the name Pivot Shifts Ahead. The first part of it is pivot. And when life threw you a curveball, you were able to pivot. And a lot of the times, it's hard to understand the season of life that we're in and why it's for and how it'll play in the future. And it's something for me being earlier into my entrepreneurial journey. It's like all these different experiences and stuff like that. It's like when I first got into this stuff, I didn't have an entrepreneurial background or upbringing. It was very much like, how can I use what I've learned through playing football? Because I grew up playing sports. So it's like, I didn't have any job experience or anything. I didn't really know anything about money. So it's like, how could I take this and apply it to the things that I have going on now, because those are the things we got. And the first rule of entrepreneurship is use what you got, right? It's like when you first started getting into what you got going on now, right? I know the journey wasn't just from news reporter to then pivot shift ahead. I know there's a little bit in between. What was it like in the in between a little bit? And how was it like navigating and just continuously pivoting until you were able to find what you're doing now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I never woke up and like, I'm going to go build a business. I just woke up and realized I had one and started, treating it like one. But I did discover this, that the good thing that's come from me kind of pursuing my passion to go help as many people as possible is it's done a lot. First of all, it's freed up my time. I get to now pick and choose what I'm going to be a part of and what I'm going to participate in and what I'm going to do. Is it in alignment with my goals and who I am as a person? And then there's no ceiling on the income opportunity. And so I like those two things because when I produced TV news, John, I think I was making like $21,000 a year.
Oh my goodness.
And we made it work because that's what it was. And yeah, it was 20 years ago, but look, a news producer in that market isn't making much more than that right now. And yeah, was it great and fun? Sure. But they told me what show I had to produce and what had to be in it and when I had to show up and what holidays I had to work and all that kind of stuff. And so I was thankful when I got fired from that I had this kind of transition into real estate because I don't know that I viewed real estate as like this entrepreneurship journey. I just kind of looked at it as something I'd love to give it a shot and see what happens. And it worked, which is great. And so, I don't know if this answers your question, but I think that the bottom line is when you just embrace the opportunities in front of you, and you decide if those opportunities are in alignment with your values and who you are and what you want to do, good things will happen. But it took me a while. I'm 45 years old.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, I'm still young, but I'm 45. And so I feel like just now am I hitting kind of my stride about what I want. And I'm thankful for the opportunities I had. I got in real estate in my 20s, and I'm thankful for that I did because, without making that shift, I'd probably still be working for somebody making $30-something thousand a year, and they're telling me I have to work on Christmas and New Year's and Thanksgiving, and here's the stories you're going to cover, and that wouldn't be fun.
Yeah, one of the things that I picked up from Keller Williams is like just the idea of just thinking big. And I come to the realization through tons of conversation that I feel like we're all limitless beings, essentially. And all the glass ceilings that we break through are also secretly built by our own hands. Mm-hmm. Whether we realize it or not is a whole nother story because a lot of time we have external factors at play. But nevertheless, these glass ceilings we're breaking through were still built by us. And so it's like, how can we break through the things that we built ourselves, and we can't solve the problems with the same mindset that we had that created them? And so it's like, there's kind of never-ending loop because you could get very lost in the weeds trying to figure all this stuff out. And one of the things I love about what you have going on, it's just like you just constantly just found more and more ways to show up. And as you progress, opportunities pretty much presented themselves and you take advantage of it. And now it's like you mentioned too, now you can choose what you want to do and make sure that it's in alignment. And there's a quote that I love in Think and Grow Rich. I'm the master of my fate and the captain of my soul, or something like that. And it just talks about like life by design, like we say in KW. And you were able to design that for yourself. And so let me ask you for a little bit of context, like what is life like now that you're able to live your life by design? Because a lot of times most people that are still operating in scarcity can even fathom the fact that we can actually live the life that we want to create for ourselves.
Well, you can live the life you want to create for yourself, but I think you've got to make some choices along the way. The first, I'd say, I agree with you that the ceilings that are created tend to be created by us. I do also think, though, that you have limitations placed on you that based on the environment that you grew up in. So, so whatever type of household you grew up in and the way that whoever raised you thought, those thoughts and feelings that they had, you've kind of downloaded, right? In fact, I think my thought would be that a lot of your kind of general thinking about what's possible and what's not possible was really probably taught to you by someone else by the time you were 8, 9, or 10 years old. Now, you have to decide, are you happy with that? I think that's the first thing. You have to make the decision of, just like what you said, nobody taught it to you. Nobody, you didn't grow up in an environment that was talking about entrepreneurship and go pursue your biggest dreams and all that kind of stuff. By the way, I'm not saying that the people who raised you did anything wrong either, but that wasn't the environment you were in. You had to make a decision, John, that you were going to go and pursue something that was important to you. And I want to encourage some of you on that. You may have grown up in households that you go back and you say are limiting to you. But that doesn't give you an excuse to not go be and become your best self. You can use that as motivation. You can become the first to break through. And I encourage you to do that. So the way you do that is you figure out what's important to you. You have to figure out ultimately what is it that you want your life to be about. And I think as an entrepreneur, you have only two choices. You have two choices that you can make your world about as an entrepreneur. Choice number one is money. You can go be an entrepreneur who pursues becoming one of the wealthiest, richest, money healthy people on the planet, right? That's choice number one. Choice number two is you can build your entrepreneurship journey around people. I want to help as many people as I possibly can. I want to support my community at the highest level that I possibly can. I want to give back. I want to be a connector of others. And so those are your two choices. You can pick whichever one's right for you. You can go pursue money through your business, or you can pursue people through your business. But I think you run into an issue here. And that's this, that whichever one you pick ends up determining the choices you make. And if you choose money as the motivator for you, then you're going to make choices that are about keeping as much as possible, having as much as possible, just being as rich as you possibly can. If you make it about people, then it comes into, hey, how can I support as many people as possible? What can I do that might be of value to them? How can I connect others? What people don't realize is that you can actually become wealthy focusing on people too. And it's more sustainable. But if the focus goes on money, eventually that's going to run out because there's no relationship there. You can love money and use people to get more money, or you can love people and use money to get more people. And if you go add value to as many people as possible, then your business, whatever you're looking to build, will grow to a much higher level than it would if you put the focus on money. John, have you ever met somebody that you got the vibe that all they really cared about was how much money could they make off something?
You can smell it.
Yeah, that works in the short term. It doesn't work long term. It doesn't work long term. Have you met somebody though, John? It's somebody like you actually, who you just want to help and support people. Yeah. And when you do that, opportunity comes your way. That's what you're on the journey of doing right now. So I would encourage people that as you decide you're going to kind of break through, which avenue are you going to go toward? Are you going to go toward, hey, I want to make as much money as possible? Or am I going to help as many people as possible? Both will bring you money, but one is more sustainable.
Yeah, and it makes me think about three things, right? There's a Drake quote that I love. And for me, I didn't have much role models growing up. So I was big on song lyrics and quotes. That's what I used to get by. That's what I used to help get myself through some of my darkest time because I didn't have someone to lean on. And one of my favorite Drake quotes is, I wish you would learn to love people and use things and not the other way around.
Yes, I agree. I think that's exactly right. That's about the only thing I agree with him on, because every sports team he follows ends up losing. So just hope he doesn't root for your team. But I agree with that. You get to pick the one. You love one and use the other. Always. Love money, then you use people to make more of it. If you love people, what'll happen, and I look at my stuff that way. I gave you my two groups. One of them's free and one of them's not. The one that's free has 112,000 people in it. There's about 70 to 80,000 of those. They're monthly active, engaged people. And then the one that's paid has 731 people in it. Now, I can go put my focus on how do I get more people to pay. Or I could put my focus onto how do I add so much value to the people that don't pay that eventually they'll want to, right? And then when they do pay, I leverage what they pay to bring that group of people even more stuff. So I think you have to decide what is your world going to be about, money or people, John?
Yeah, and it reminds me of the next thing we're actually going to get to. Two things. Was a guy named Alex Hormozy. I think I quoted him on Pivot Shift the other day. And he's a big time entrepreneur. He's like 32 years old, already has $100 million net worth. But he's a very, very philosophical guy, very, very deep thinker, which is why I love following him so much, because he has a lot of very interesting viewpoints on the world. And one of the things that he talks about is that if your free stuff can be better than other people's paid stuff, you will always have a fundamental advantage in your marketplace, no matter what industry you're in. And he also talks about too, which is going to touch on an earlier point that you said. He talks about, let's say this game is this hypothetical game of poker, right? And normally when you play poker at the casino, once you're done, you cash out, you play your game with, the best game that you got with the cards you're dealt, and you take the chips and, you have a good, happy day, right? Let's say you win. But in the game of life, we play the best game that we can with the cards we're dealt. But then when the Reaper comes to tax us, we have to put all the chips back to the center of the table, and then it gets redistributed. So for all the people that are chasing money, it's like you're trying to cheat the game because all those chips that you accumulated will all be for nothing because they're just going to get pushed back to the middle and redistributed anyway. So anyone that chases money, for me, it's like it's hard to really grasp because it's like, man, like, do you not see past, once our time here is up, it's like it's all for nothing, really, essentially. It's just like, that's why, and it segues into my next quote, which I quoted one time, I think, on Pivot. It was either on Pivot or one of the Power Hour calls. It's focus on passive impact, not passive income. Because if you can change people's lives while you sleep, you'll be able to make more money than you'll ever know what to do with, which is exactly what you kind of embody with your, embody with your pivot shift stuff. Because even while you're sleeping, people are still on the calls and the Facebook groups and watching the replays. And as you've been saying this entire time, it's like you've been providing so much value and coming from contribution. And I think this is a perfect way to segue into our conversation really today. It's like coming from contribution, having that servant heart, that servant leader, like, how does one really adopt that mindset when you're coming from scarcity? Because for me, growing up, my grandma always taught me, like, John, when you're at someone's house, and she's Dominican, like, she only speaks Spanish. It's like, John, when you're at someone's house, never ask for anything. Like, don't ask for nothing unless they offer you. It's like,
Yep.
So we're just taught.
I was just told programmed. They offer to you, say no, thank you.
Yeah, right. It's like,
so, I mean, that's the household I grew up in. Was like, if you go to somebody's house and they're like, hey, would you like, you want a cookie? No, I don't want one. Thank you so much for offering me, which is the wrong answer, by the way. They're offering it to you because they want to give it to you. Yeah. I was brought up in taking that, and even one step further, they do offer, say no.
Yeah, it's just like, how do we start to unpack that and wire that? Because it's like something that it takes so long, and looking within, like, that itself is just like looking into the abyss of the darkness, whatever you want to call it. Like, looking internally is just like a very demanding task because you don't know what you'll find, and sometimes you'll relive things that you probably don't want to relive. So it's like, how do we begin to unpack that so we can unwire all this programming that we've kind of been installed growing up with?
I mean, that's a really deep question and probably beyond my area of expertise. But I would tell you that I think for me, I had to make some decisions that I didn't want to continue.
Yeah.
Especially as I became a father, I didn't want to continue some of the stuff that I grew up in. And look, I had really good parents, but all parents come with issues and challenges. And there were things growing up that I'm like, nah, I don't like that. I don't want that. I think my mom has never left the country.
Yeah.
And that hurts my heart, right? I want her to be able to travel the world. We're going on a trip this summer with my 11-year-old, and we'll be gone for 3 weeks, and we'll be in England, France, Spain, Italy, Amsterdam, so the Netherlands, and Ireland. Like, my 11-year-old's going to 6 countries this summer. My mom's never left the country. Like, so there were things that I didn't want to continue, and I knew what some of those things were. And I think a lot of us say stuff like, well, I don't want to do any of that stuff my parents were doing. I don't want to sound like my dad. I do sound like my dad. There are parts that I didn't want to continue. And so I got purposeful about that. The way I did it, by the way, was I hired a coach to work specifically on that. Yeah. So once I found out Terry was pregnant and I was going to be a dad, which is really kind of the only thing I really ever wanted to be, was a dad. I knew that there were certain things growing up that I didn't want to pass on to my child. And so I had a coach for like 5.5 years, the first 5.5 years. And it was, well, before she was born, and then the 5 years into her life, I talked to him every week, and we straight up talked about either how I was thinking, what my mindset was, how I break through some of the scarcity mindset that I had, and then, how I can become a great father and a great husband. And that was huge help for me.
Yeah. So then to continue this, where we're going, right? So now let's say we face this, right? We're starting to work on ourselves. We're starting to grow. And now we're starting to step into the community. How do we find our fit within the community, right? We're starting to come from contribution, but it's like, what do I give? I don't really know. And especially going into a community where everyone's far more successful, at least in one aspect of the community than you are. So it's like, for me, I don't think I shared this story with you, but my first social media class that I taught for the people in the pivot group was back in January of last year. And it's because I was on the early birds call, and I was in the gym normally at the time because, as you know, it's an early morning call, and I was working out, and they were talking about Facebook. And at that point in time, I wasn't really doing much for social media. I just grew up with it. So it's like, I kind of knew how to use it, I guess you could say, compared to people more seasoned than I am.
Sure.
And so I just made a quick Facebook post because, as you know, everyone in the gym always making weird noises and dropping weights or whatever. I was like, I'm not going to unmute myself because, as you know, how that would sound. And then on the Facebook post, Lee was like, hey, John, you mind teaching a class on this? And I was like, I never taught a class before. And she was like, John, let us know when you want it scheduled. And that first class ended up getting 440 people to sign up. And that kind of just like lifted me up. And I was like, I'm not a social media expert. I had none of this stuff in stores whatsoever. But it just kind of presented itself because I showed up. So like, what would you say? Like, how could you begin providing, value to whatever community that you decide to hop into?
Okay, so a couple of things. First is I think your community will find you. I think if you start to add value, then the community will find you. That's what happened to me, and I think that's what's happened to you. I didn't intend to go build some big community. I didn't jump into some community and say, hey, I'm an expert. I just started sharing with others, and the community grew because what we were sharing and what we were talking about was of value to people. The other key is, as someone who's kind of facilitating or leading this community, which is a really goofy thing to say, but that's what it is. Yeah. I'm not the expert. I'm the connector. Like rarely, John, do I come in. You're on the call almost every morning.
Yeah,
I offer my thoughts and my opinions, but most of the contributions are done by others in the community. While I might be the face of this community, I am not some expert. I'm not some genius. I want to hear from everybody else. So I think that, recognizing that A, your community will find you, and that B, your community is made up of others, allow others to contribute and be the connector of that group, you'll be in good shape. John, I think about you. You and I have something in common here, and that is you add a bunch of value to people, even though you don't really sell houses.
Yeah.
Like, how many homes have you sold in your career?
I did 3 rentals.
3, is that right?
3 rentals, yeah. 3 rental transactions.
3 rentals. I personally have sold 12 homes in my career. 12. I've been in the business 18 years. People would look at that and go, the guy's never sold a house before. Well, it's not true. I've sold 12. But here's the thing. I know the models better than just about anybody else. I know what it takes to be successful. I ran 2 of the most successful real estate offices in Keller Williams. One was the most profitable in the region. I was a member of the top team in the entire company for a period of time. Like, I know what it takes to run a successful business, and I can add that value to people. But I don't think you necessarily need the track record to be able to add value. If you look at, I think you could probably say you played football. I mean, Bill Belichick, I think a lot of people would say, is probably the best coach in NFL history.
Yeah.
And we could put some other names on the list, but I think people would look right now, at least present day Bill Belichick, the best coach in NFL history. He was not a great football player.
I didn't know that.
He was not a great football player, but he was the best coach in NFL history. And by the way, oftentimes when you look at the elite athletes that then move into coaching, there's very few examples of success. The only one I can think of, and I'm biased, would be Larry Bird. When Larry Bird coached the Indiana Pacers for 3 years, he did take them to an NBA Finals. But most of the time, that's not how it works. You go look at some of the elite coaches. They were not elite players. They were really good players, but they weren't elite. So I don't think that you just need to know the models and systems for how something works. Like, John, you don't have to be the best social media person of all time, but you have to know what works and then help people implement what works, connect them to others who can help teach them what works. And then you become invaluable to that community.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you mentioned that you're a connector. And it's something that I've kind of stumbled into myself. Like, I just hosted my 100th episode celebration. So essentially what I did was a client appreciation event just for my podcast. So like all these ideas, as I said earlier, like we talked about, it's just taking what I've learned, all these other endeavors, and figuring out how to apply them to what I got going on now. So like the client appreciation event pretty much I did yesterday, I had close to like 40 people show up yesterday. We celebrated. I did some in-person interviews. We had a little cake. And so I had my friend John, he's an agent. He was bartending. He worked at a restaurant for a little while. But it's like all these little ideas I picked up from along the way. and applied it. And so many people, like one of my friend's mom, and this is to my podcast, and she was there. And so it was like, it's funny to see her because it's like, she's like my friend's mom. So it's like kind of weird, but like also like, thanks for supporting. And she brought some of her people from her job. And she was like, John, when I was thinking of coming, I thought it was going to be like only like real estate investor people. Because one thing I've done is I've attended like every networking event on the planet, I feel like, here and where I'm at. So I know tons of people from tons of different areas. And I'm also getting into public speaking. So it's like, I know like public speakers as well. So it was a great mix of like people a lot older than I am, people my age, people I went to high school with that aren't even in entrepreneurship at all. And it's like this giant, like very diverse mixed community of people from all different walks of life, which ties into the title Walk to Wealth, right? So it's like, I was able to connect all these people together and they were so great before. So it's like, how does one start to become a connector? Because it's something I feel it's like with this podcast, I've been able to connect on such a deeper level because I just get to get in this space where it's just two people just having this, I like to call it a dance, like this conversation where just time just ceases to exist and we're just diving into each other's thoughts or just having a conversation to provide value to listeners. It's like, how does one become a connector, like a good connector, if they feel that's something that they kind of may have a knack for and want to really dive deeper into that?
Well, a couple of things. These are just thoughts off the top of my head. One is, what's something you're passionate and excited about?
Yeah.
What gets you motivated? What would you want to be talking about, connecting about, and learning more about? That'd be number one. Number two, you've got to recognize that your job is to not be the expert. Your job is to go meet the experts. And so if you look at what, we do inside of Pivot Shift Ahead every morning, I pull out a piece from a book that I didn't write, right? I didn't write this book, Shift book, or whatever other book I'm reading, but I'll pull out a piece that spoke to me about something, share it with everybody, and then I ask, what are your thoughts? And we'll have 10, 12, 13 people share what their thoughts are. So again, I'm not the expert. They're the expert. And then once a week, I interview somebody. It's like a podcast. We don't turn it into a podcast. It's basically a podcast.
Yeah.
I interview somebody who's doing something great or unique or interesting. And I come from curiosity. I want to learn more. And I learned this from Gary Keller. I mean, if you look at Gary Keller, who of course is the founder of Keller Williams and still heavily involved in running the company, he is curious. He's an interviewer. He wants to know what's working for people. He wants to learn the system so he can share it with others. Like Gary's not out selling houses every day. What's Gary doing? He's interviewing agents and learning from people who are selling houses every day so he can help the people inside his community grow bigger businesses. So I think that if you want to, be somebody that is a connector, then be curious. Don't be an expert. When you go and interview them, ask them their thoughts about things without necessarily then giving your 2 cents about it. But just, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Well, where did you start? Okay, well, what's the next step? Okay, well, what would your advice be, though, if somebody runs into this problem? What would you do? Like, that's I think, how you become a connector. And then you go back to your community and go, oh, my gosh, I just talked to Sally Joe Johnson, who is doing this. And here's the 3 things I got from what she shared. And it was really, really smart. Now, I want you to go back and watch it. And then you tell me what you got from it, too.
Yeah,
go implement what she said to go implement and let me know what happens. We just did this right with Tulio Pena, who's a great agent that if you haven't had him on your podcast, you need to have him on your podcast.
I interviewed him 2 weeks ago. 2 or 3 weeks.
And he just came on. He's from Colorado Springs. He just came on and I interviewed him. Tell me about what you sent out to get these listings. He told us about an email. What did you do next? What happens if they said this? And the credit is coming to the community because I connected Tulio to everybody else with his system. I didn't say, go do this. Now, I did say, go do what Tulio is telling you to do. I go implement that and give me your feedback. And then people implement and we come back and we find out, well, now, wait a minute. Someone says, I followed up this email with a text and my results went up. And so now, do you see what's happening in this community? But I'm not coming up with these ideas and it takes all the pressure off. It takes all the pressure off just to be someone who says, oh my gosh, I know this person who can help you with that. That happened on the call this morning. I'm talking to somebody this morning. James, I need help with such and such. I go, oh my gosh, let me connect you with this person who can help you with that because I think you two need to know each other. Now, who's the resource? Who's the person that helped her? Right? I became the resource, but I don't have all the answers. And I think that's it. If you want to be a powerful leader of a community, take the pressure off of you and just go meet people and connect them to each other.
Yeah, I think we talk about your network is your net worth all the time, right? It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And it's something that I start to see more and more of. Like I met this one guy named Ken Jocelyn. He's like a big agent with like EXP. He's like sold like over 200 million in volume over the course of his life or something like that, like 10 years, something like that. And I was just talking to him and he was like, man, when I come to people, the only thing that I'm thinking of when I meet people is who can I connect them to? Who do I know that I could point them in the right direction? Like who do I know that they need to know so that they can help and grow further? And he always talks about like when you're coming to someone and you don't need or want anything from them and you just want to figure out how you can help, like that is the best thing you can do. And it's something that, as I said, as I start to learn more and more on my journey, it's like, wow, like this actually is true. And it's hard to kind of grasp at first because it's like, you know, it's like, well, how does meeting great people going to help me? I need to start a business, something like that. But it's like getting in the right rooms has been everything. And so I know you mentioned getting a coach earlier. So like for you, while you were, you know, of course you were getting this community going, but like who were you going to get help while you were creating and cultivating this community so that you could be going in the right direction? Or did you just kind of like figure it out all on your own as you were going along?
I mean, you're giving me too much credit. The community was an accident. I just happened to be first. So I got into action quickly. And I think that's one way as an entrepreneur, if you want great things to happen, you just have to be willing to take action. And I was the first one to take action. Now, by the way, it wouldn't, you know, we're 3 years into this community that continues to grow and people are still participating daily. So it's not just being first, right? There is value to participating and being part of it. But honestly, to start, it was just being first. And then I connected with people who I thought could give me good advice about what should we talk about, right? So I went to Jay Papasan, who's Gary's co-author on all the books. Hey, what should we be doing in here? What do you think this should look like? I had a MAPS coach, a guy named Jordan Freed, who helped me kind of build the communities. What should they look like? What direction should they go? Now that I'm going to have a paid community, what should that look like in relationship to the free community? And all those different things. I try to benchmark off what others are doing and study what others are doing. And that goes back to what you said earlier. In addition to asking the question, who can I connect this person with? I would also ask, what can I learn from them?
Yeah.
You know, what is it that I can learn from their experience that I can use to either help me or others as well?
So what are some pieces of advice that you would say for those of us that don't have a JFAB saying that we can look up to, right? Because younger people, it's like, of course, everyone I think in entrepreneurship is susceptible to like shiny object syndrome. But it's like, I feel like it's even more like we're more susceptible when like we're younger and we're first getting into entrepreneurship because everything like, oh my goodness, you're so young. And it's like, you should do this. Like I had a guy yesterday at the event too, who's like, yo, John, you should think about doing solar. And I just kind of smiled and said, no, thank you. But it's like, there's so many opportunities. And when you have a bunch of time and a bunch of energy, it's like, of course you could find success in everything. So it's like, how do we find a good mentor? Like, what are some red flags and things to avoid when finding like a mentor so that we could progress in our journey?
Well, you've got to understand first what's important to you. What are you passionate about? What are your standards? What are your kind of morals? You need those guardrails up so you know what to go. Like the solar guy, I'm sure the dude is awesome, but you don't want to sell solar. And now, by the way, if you wanted to go, if all you cared about was money and you saw this as a way to go pursue something to make some money real quick, then you would go pursue solar. But that's not who you are. You are somebody who wants to pour into people, and you can't, that doesn't fit in, well, I'm sure it's a great opportunity. This dude is awesome. That doesn't fit in alignment with what you want. So it's an easy no. So you got to figure out what it is you want. The next, I think, two things, and I learned this from, I did a parenting podcast for
Positively Dad, right?
years, and then the pandemic just kind of changed my focus, and so I still have it, but I haven't done a new episode in like 2 years, and I probably will again, but it just, with what happened inside of Pivot Shift Ahead and my other stuff, it's just not a priority. But what I found was most people say yes. You go find people that are doing great things and you ask them, can I talk to you? Would you spend 20 minutes with me? I've had most of them say yes. I just looked up the other day and saw Notre Dame hired its new basketball coach, a guy named Micah Shrewberry. He was on my podcast. How did he get on my podcast? Because I posted on my Facebook once, hey, I want to talk to a coach of a college or pro team because I want to get into the mindset of what it means to succeed. Who do you know? And they gave me this guy's name. He was an assistant coach at Purdue at the time, but somebody that I knew, I think, had sold him his house. So we got connected. I got him on my podcast. Next thing you know, he's a head coach at Notre Dame, right? And so this is a good guy. I've had two guys that have won Super Bowls on my podcast. One of them I just emailed. I found his email address online. I emailed him. This guy named Gary Brackett. It's a great story. He was an undrafted he was undrafted in the NFL, and he was a walk-on in college. But the guy played in the NFL for 9 years and won a Super Bowl. Like, that's a great career. How did I get him? I emailed him. I emailed him. I mean, social media, Instagram and Twitter and all this, it makes it so easy to connect with people. But make sure you're following the right ones. Follow people that are in alignment with who you are and what your goals are. And if you do that, I think you can learn a lot.
100%. James, you dropped a ton of just down-to-earth nuggets this entire conversation. Where could we connect with you at? Where could we find you at? We want to learn more about everything that you have going on.
Well, jamesdshaw.com. jamesdshaw.com is my website where I've got my agent interviews that I do, and you can learn about my private mastermind community there. Instagram is James D. Shaw. Pretty simple. So you can find me in those two places, and I'd love to connect and learn from your community too, John.
Amazing. So now it's time for our famous 5 questions. Question number 1. What is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
What is the most impactful lesson I've learned in life? I think it's the decisions you make daily matter. That ultimately you decide what you'll do, you decide what you won't do, and that determines what happens next.
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
I think I just think it's being kind. Stay out of judgment, be in curiosity, and be kind to people.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, which book would you recommend?
I would read Finish by John Acuff. I think most of us have great ideas and we have no problem starting things, but it's getting over the finish line is where we have a challenge. That book absolutely changed my world. Finish by John Acuff.
What is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
I read a story one time that a majority of people are forgotten about within 2 generations. In other words, most people listening to this call cannot name all of their great-grandparents. That's 2 generations forgotten about. The ones that people remember are the ones who had a lasting impact on others. So I just want to impact others. I want people to look back and be thankful for the time that we spent together and allow that legacy to continue.
And for anyone that wants to embark on their walk to wealth today, what is the first step you recommend they take?
Don't be dumb, right? So in other words, don't do dumb things. Know what it is that's important to you. Know what you need to pursue, and then wake up and make the decision to pursue them. Do things that move you forward.
Alrighty, James. Thanks again for hopping on. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know we got pretty deep pretty quickly in the middle there, but I genuinely appreciate you taking the time today to just have this conversation with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm proud of you, man. Keep it up.